Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's seminar. We're honored to have our own alum, CCOM alum, Patrick Debroisse, and he will be kind of like giving us an introduction to the hydrographic certification in the United States. But before I pass it on to him, I'm just going to quickly read his bio. Patrick Debroisse is an officer in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Commissioned Officer Corps, and is currently assigned as branch chief at the Gulf Cartographic Products branch. He holds a Bachelor in Mechanical Engineering from Norwich University, the Military College of Vermont, and a Master's in Ocean Engineering, Ocean Mapping from the University of New Hampshire. He has served in a variety of roles in his almost 12-year career in NOAA. They include tours aboard NOAA ships Fairweather and Ferdinand Asler, as well as a tour as officer in charge of Bay Hydro 2 and as a research assistant at CCOM. Patrick is a certified level 1 Master Hydrographer by the Hydrographic Society of America and the National Society of Professional Surveyors. And of course, I'm giving the presentation today because he's certified. Please join me in welcoming Patrick.
Thanks, Elias. Thanks for letting me come up. I'm glad I was actually here, able to come up in person. Happy to be back. This is a great time to be giving this talk because Hydrographic Certification Board is really trying to get out and reach out to folks and help educate them on the certification program. Several years ago, there was a shift in how or what the scheme looked like in the United States. The National Society of Professional Surveyors and the Hydrographic Society of America Certification Board worked towards the revision of those requirements and to meet the IBSC requirements, educational requirements, and to kind of come in line with other certification schemas around the world. We'll talk a little bit of those as we get into this. This will be just an overview of how it works, and at the end, if you'd like to talk to us about certification and what it's going to take, maybe talk through your background and maybe what's left, feel free to find us after. Find me, or Bree in the back is also on the board. We can help you. I want to start with a few questions just to get an understanding. How many folks here knew that there was hydrographic certification in the US or any other area? Okay, that's good. Who is already planning, whether it's the US scheme or any other, to get hydrographic certification? You? Okay. Anyone that's tried to do it so far? What's been the hardest part, you think?
Getting the paperwork together.
Paperwork? Yeah, okay. We hear that a lot. We'll talk about that. And then is there anyone in here that is already certified? Okay. Under what scheme?
Australian Hydrographic.
Okay. Good to know. I just want to expand on my background a little bit, only because it might help you to look at where your career is at or where your career is going. Maybe you might see parallels, and that might help you, think about how what you might need in order to reach these standards. So, as I said, I was on the Ferdinand Asler. I was there for 2.5 years. Started out as just a junior officer, learning how to do everything. Eventually started working in the surveys and managing surveys on behalf of the chief of party who was overseeing everything. So, working on the sheets, processing data, planning day ops, making products, that kind of thing. Eventually became what NOAA calls a hydrographer in charge. So that's somebody that's out collecting that data, overseeing sonar operations, in some cases overseeing the data processing. From the Fairweather, I went to the Bay Hydro, where I became that chief of party. So that next level, that's overseeing the survey as a whole, and sort of bigger project planning, not just the local survey sheet, but boat operations and on top of the survey work and even some budget stuff like that. Came here, got a Cat A. That's a piece of this we'll talk about. And then went to the Ferdinand Asler, which is another ship, as the operations officer. And so now took kind of the skills learned in Fairweather and Bay Hydro and applying it to a larger ship, big surveys, offshore, various equipment. And so you can see sort of a career progression and steps up through the system to try to expand experience, and that sort of leads into the schema here, and what you might want to pay attention to in your own careers to see if you can fit this. So we'll start with basics of the program: education versus certification versus licensing. We'll touch on that briefly. We'll talk about certification requirements, education experience, the logbook, the paperwork you're talking about. We're going to touch a lot on that. And then some recommendations for success and some benefits why we think that you should do this. So I'll just first briefly talk about the sponsors of this. In the United States, it's the National Society of Professional Surveyors. This is a professional organization that helps out with not only the hydrographic certification, but also survey licensure for land surveyors, professional land surveyors. They do things like monitor legislation and regulations, both in states and federal. They work with other groups that have similar organizations that are in the geospatial community that have mutual interests, and so they work together to ensure that those interests are sought after, helped into legislation and that kind of thing. The Hydrographic Society of America. This is a nonprofit organization that promotes education in hydrography, including inland, offshore, positioning, mapping, charting, and other related earth sciences. And so together, the THSOA and the NSPS administer the Hydrographic certification. On odd number years, so not this year, but next year, THSOA holds the US Hydrographic Conference. On the even number years, it's the Canadian Hydrographic Conference, and they sort of work together throughout those years. And then there's the IBSC, so the International Board of Standards of Compliance for hydrographic surveys and nautical cartographers. That's a committee. They review and review academic standards, and they look over programs to meet those standards. For individual recognition programs like the certification programs, like schools that have Cat A, Cat B programs. So they're the ones that are sort of administering those standards. And so the certification processes that we're going to talk about today all meet this standard. So just a few basics. IBSC has recognized the US Certified Hydrographers, and it aligns with those international standards. The US system has a path to certification for those with a recognized Cat A or Cat B education, but there's alternative paths for those who don't. It provides a higher level certification for those who have qualifications and experience necessary to conduct, surveys and advise clients appropriately, procedures, relative to the type of survey being conducted. So, in other words, if you've had a lot of experience, there's a higher level certification that you can go for. It ensures application of standards through detailed documentation. Again, we're going to get into that. You're going to hear me talk about the documentation a lot. It's a big deal. Education, training, and experience. And it helps to maintain a competent workforce because, we require professional development hours through training and experience and things like that. So within the United States, there are two levels. Level 1 is the Certified Master Hydrographer. That's the highest attainable level. The educational requirements are similar, the same as the Cat A academic program. And on top of that, practical experience. Or if you don't have a Cat A, you can achieve this through a science degree with additional training and that practical experience. The other one is level 2, Certified Hydrographer. And this is really the bulk of all the certifications that THSOA sees. So this is in line with the Cat B, the IBSC Cat B academic program, practical experience as well. You can have a science background and additional training to meet those requirements along with your practical experience. So I want to pause here and just talk about education versus certification versus licensure. So IBSC, Cat A, and B programs meet the IBSC educational requirements, but they're not a personal certification. Certification is sort of that next step in what we're talking about here, which is a recognition by a certifying organization, a board of peers, that you not only meet the educational requirements, but also have met further guidelines, maintain professional development, have experience doing this in the field. Currently, there are 4 organizations that can certify hydrographers around the world. There's Australia, Canada, the International Federation of Hydrographic Societies, that's Europe, and then the one we're talking about today in the US, NSPS and THSOA. Licensing is beyond that, so there's licensing as a legal requirement. So some states, in order to perform hydrography within the United States, you have to hold a license as a professional engineer, professional surveyor, depending on the state. And so that's a legal requirement that is set by the state, and that's beyond what we're talking about here. And then I'll pause here to also mention sort of how you can see similarities between the US and the others. So Australia also has 2 levels, similar to the level 1. Their level 1 is very similar to our level 1. Level 2 is similar to level 2. Canada actually has 3. So they have the hydrographic technician, certified hydrographer, hydrographic executive. Their technician is similar to the US level 2. Their certified hydrographer is similar to the US level 1. And then the executive is more like a senior manager type, higher level programs working maybe on national or international standards, things like that. They also have for their technician and hydrographer, they also have an in-training designation. So that's somebody that is working towards that. They aren't quite there yet, but they're on their way. And then in Europe, there's an affiliate. So that's like a student that's starting to work into the program. They have a level 2 and a level 1, similar to the US, and then a level 0, which is like Canada's executive, where that's kind of the next level, national and international work. All of these, it should be mentioned, all of these follow the same IBSC S5A, S5B education requirements. So if you're going to a Cat A school or a Cat B school training, those education requirements they're the same. The US, we actually just talked about it yesterday. The US is exploring the idea of level 0s and affiliate programs similar to what the others have. They aren't there yet, but potentially stay tuned. You might see them possibly in the future. They're still being talked about. And so I threw these up here. I'll stop here just for like 30 seconds in case anyone wants to provide the website of any of the other programs if you're not looking for a US one. And then this one here will get you to a list of schools and training houses that have Cat A or Cat B programs. All right. So now we'll dive into the US side a little deeper here. So we have the Certified Master Hydrographer. This is level 1. This is the highest attainable level in the United States. They're fully capable of undertaking and managing hydrographic surveys. That means IHO standards, S44, and the additional standards of like of NOAA or Army Corps or whatever your client might be. They have to have a theoretical education and background enough to be a hydrographer in charge and develop specifications, quality control and assurance systems, and respond to a full range of projects. They should have experience and knowledge base to deal with a wide range of different acquisition types, problematic data, things like that. So just a quick flow chart to show you how you can work your way towards the level 1. So the first question is, do you or do you not have a Cat A? Some folks coming out of here will, maybe some won't. But if you don't, it doesn't stop you. But if you do, you can go and then start assessing your hydrographic experience. If you don't, you might have to look at additional coursework You should collect syllabus from your various courses that you think meet the S5 requirements, and could be because you'll have to turn those into the board. Following that, you should get 48 months of hydrographic experience with 24 months in the field and 24 months in responsible technical charge. We'll talk about that definition a little later. Once you achieve those, you have the education and you have the experience level, you submit an application to the board. That must include the logbook, again, documentation, we'll talk about that, and an abstract for a report for approval, along with 4 references. And for the level 1 of your references must be either from professional land surveyor, professional engineer, or a certified hydrographer. Doesn't necessarily have to be a level 1 hydrographer, but a level 1 or a level 2. We on the board will review that, look at your references, look at the abstract. If it checks all the boxes, we will let you know, and then ask you for a project report. We'll talk a little bit more about the report further on because it's going to affect it affects both levels. We get that report, we read through it. If it's approved, you will have an exam, and then assuming you pass the exam, you are a certified master hydrographer. So level 2. This is intended to recognize practical comprehension of hydrographic surveying for individuals with the skill to carry out the various hydrographic surveying tasks, along with the essential theoretical background. So again, we're looking at both education and experience. You should be capable of undertaking and managing hydrographic surveys and meet the standards for your clients and the national standards, international standards. It does not require a baccalaureate degree, but it must still meet S5B standards. So you don't have to meet the S5A standards, you do have to meet S5B. And they require, S5B can be hard to achieve without, going to a specific program for it. So there might be additional training that we might ask you to do, but you should be looking into things like trigonometry, calculus, statistics, and so on. Everything you see here, you can look these up online, and they're also listed in the paperwork packet that you can get on the THSOA website as part of the logbook. So again, we'll look here at the flow chart. Again, this is for level 2. Depending on the type of academic program you've completed, that will affect the minimum required experience for you. So you can see a Cat A will need a minimum of 24 months, Cat B 36, and if you're going outside of the Cat A or B route, then it's 60. Again, if you are going to go the educational requirements route, we might need things like syllabus from various courses or training certificates from places that you've gotten or believe you've received the education that meets S5B. We'll need those to the board. So you would then go for your experience. You need then a minimum of 24 months of hydrographic field experience and 24 months in technical charge. Again, we'll touch on that in a little bit. Same thing, once you believe you've reached the educational requirements and the experience requirements, you put in your application, the logbook, abstract, and some references, and the board will take a look at it. Same thing, you put in that abstract, the board will determine we like the abstract, and then you can submit a report. Again, that report needs to be about a project in both cases, a project that was 4 weeks in duration or longer. And it should include all sorts of things we'll talk about further, but it should show your experience in the field and your knowledge of the hydrographic craft, if you will. You'll turn that paper in, it'll be reviewed by the certification board. You'll then go for a test, and if you pass that, you're now a certified hydrographer. Certified hydrographers can put CH after the name. Certified Master Hydrographers can put CMH after their name. And if you have a Cat A and you're a CMH, you can do CMH Cat A. I think I forgot to mention that earlier. So we're going to get into this paperwork. So we already know this could be one of the major sticking points. It's one of the more difficult parts of this. So you must submit a detailed record of your education and work experience. This information has to be condensed into several forms, and we'll kind of walk through. I'll show you actually examples of my personal forms so you can see what we're looking at and put them all together. We refer to them as the logbook. So if you ever are working with the board and the board's talking to you about your logbook, this is what we mean. There's 4 of them. So it's an engagement summary form. That's essentially just a spreadsheet that identifies your various engagements. Education detail form. This is where you're going to look at each piece of that S5, whether it's B or A that you're trying to follow, and you're going to tell us how you met those. Project engagement. This is where you're going to get into the details of any projects that you're including. Basically, tell us your experience and show us the breadth of that experience. And then a competency form as well. Again, all put together, that's your logbook. So we'll look at samples here. This is from mine. And you want to list anything and everything that you think would be related to this, training, actual engagements. You might have, split out individually into each survey. You might, if you're like me, where I was sort of stationed to one ship for a while, you can put that all under one. You want to list out the months, right? So this is a month counter to look at your in-field and in-charge experience. And you can see here where I put the definition of in technical charge. So you're directing, you have personnel supervision of the survey work, personal supervision of the survey work. You have critical decision authority. And what's interesting here is it's not just in the field, right? It certainly includes the field, but it can include things like data processing and analysis and office planning. All of that can be part of your responsible technical charge. And so again, you want to have details in here. You want to show us the breadth of your experience. You also want to, this is one I'm going to highlight several times, that engagement number. Help us to help you by ensuring consistency with your engagement numbers throughout the forms. And you can even include things that aren't necessarily related. Like I included my job as an engineer, not hydrographic related in here. It just shows, again, your experience. The next one here, this is a much smaller little snippet, but this is looking at your education. So here's an example. Show us where you've met the geology and geophysics, and then you're going to list out your courses and, importantly, the engagement number. Right? Again, please ensure those engagement numbers are consistent, because when we go to the summary form, that'll help us, look through your paperwork. For those that are trying to do this without a Cat A or a Cat B, this is where you can help point us to the specific courses where you think you met a certain requirement. This is where you might, attach a syllabus of a specific course. You might include transcripts if you need. If it's like a standalone course, ask the folks that put that course on for any certifications they might have for that course, or again, the syllabus. Give us as much information as possible. Make it go much smoother. So some best practices, and we'll get a little bit further into the logbook here. We prefer, we want to see the competencies from education and training, followed by your practical experience, or even like throughout. Show us that you're getting training while you're getting practical experience, and increasing, that knowledge level. It's easiest, as you might have figured out, to fulfill those requirements for your Cat A and Cat B program. You don't have to. You could show us that you've met that through some other degree program. That's a little bit harder to do, but certainly not impossible. More details might be needed. You might have a little bit of back and forth with the board and yourself to try to fill that in. And the hardest is fulfilling that education through experience, which can be done, but you're going to have to show us, here's where I learned all of these things in even more detail. So here we'll go to, we looked at education. We'll look here a little bit at experience. So this is just one. You can see the level of detail that you might want to include. So lists of the equipment that you used. You might want to include how skilled you were in that equipment. One of the things you might also want to do is, as you add engagements into your logbook, you might want to say, an early one might have you saying, I was, a beginner with multi-beam. But as you go through, if you can indicate progression, through your logbook, that's good. You want to list software packages that you've used, and again, same thing. Show us progression. Where do you think you were beginner, intermediate, and so on? You might put a little narrative in there just to say, here's what I was doing and here's why I was doing it. And then again, some of the responsibilities and duties, show us how you were in technical charge, if that's what you're claiming a specific, from a specific detail or engagement. So you get all that done. That's your logbook. Again, that's the hard part, as you said. You get all that done, and you turn it in to the board. The other thing you need to turn in is an abstract, and that abstract should be for a project that was 4 weeks or more in duration, and it has to have been completed in the last 5 years. You want to talk about things like the planning, how it went in the field, what equipment you used and why you used that equipment. You might want to talk about data quality. Were there issues? If there were, how did you get over those issues? What did the client think? Was it a great success? Was it not a success? That's fair too. But you want to show the board that you've got that experience, that you can talk and write technically about hydrography and the job that you performed. And then, of course, the board will look at that abstract and ask you for the report, and you'll turn that in later. And then there's the exam. So the exam is 160 questions, and you must score 70% or higher. You have 3 hours to complete it. Level 1 exam, so the Certified Master, has an additional 25 questions, and they're on more advanced hydrographic topics. It's open book, but they must be printed. Can't bring a tablet. No Control F. But you can bring manuals. You can bring your personal notes. There's a small list there. You're looking at the standards from Army Corps, standards from NOAA, international standards, Bowditch, so some navigation stuff. You might look at things for tides or LIDAR, things like that. There's a larger list on the website, and of course you can talk to other hydrographers and or the board and get an idea of like what might be suggested to bring along. And then there's a general breakdown of the composition of the test. It's proctored and it's on paper. So you take your 3 hours. You can use all these materials, fill it out, and then at least mine, I don't know if they all are, but it was scored right there. And then that gets forwarded to the board for final certification. So just real quick on some of the benefits of being certified. So more than half of the US states require registration as a PLS, professional land surveyor, or professional engineer to practice hydrography, but a lot of those licensed individuals don't necessarily have a hydrographic background. So if you are going to survey in a state that requires that, you also have this on top of your professional license. This shows that you have that hydrographic background. It recognizes your education and experience. It helps to recognize you international. Again, we talked about the other three schemas. They're all essentially the same, are very, very similar. And so, when you're talking to an Australian certified hydrographer, they know what that means. You know what that means, for them, because they're similar. There are increasing requirements by various clients to have certified hydrographers as part of the team. So NOAA requires it, Army Corps requires it. I've heard of different port authorities requiring it. Sometimes the Navy requires it as well. So you can see there's an increasing amount of clients that want certified hydrographers. Now, they're not necessarily saying certified hydrographers versus certified master, although I have heard of it yet, but you can see how that could happen in the future. It increases public safety by ensuring high standards of competence. So again, we're meeting an international standard of competency through IBSC, the educational requirements, and then also the experience requirements. And it instills a sense of accountability and provides confidence in the work of you and your company. So when people see, hey, this survey was completed by a certified hydrographer, that carries some weight. And finally, I want to kind of close out here with just some general recommendations. So again, talking about the documentation, use the THSOA, THSOA forms, go onto the website, get them, start them early. For those that haven't started their career outside of the university yet, this is the time. Download those things, start filling them out. And as you take on new jobs or do different work in the field, fill them out. That'll make it easier on you versus doing what I did and do it when you try to turn it in and you have to try to remember all those details. It's not very easy. So that goes into tracking your progression. Maintain your transcripts and your training certificates, project data, whatever's going to make, writing those forms or filling out those forms and writing your paper easier. You might have project reports that you had to turn into your client. Maybe have a copy of those ready, especially if it's a project you're particularly proud of. That'll help you write that report later. Find a mentor. That could be an already certified hydrographer, could be a supervisor that you trust, could be faculty or staff here. Somebody that can help you work on your training, work on your experience level, help you get that breadth of knowledge and fill all this stuff out and get it to the board. Explicitly but concisely, which is maybe those compete. Tying your education and training experience engagements in the handbook, that'll help expedite review. So tell us what you did. Tell us how you felt about it. Show us where you gained all that experience. Show us that breadth of experience. And then having a couple notes, having just enough education or just enough experience, that might trigger the board to ask some more questions. Doesn't mean that you're not going to get through that process. It just we might ask some questions, and then again, don't assume your experience is well known. Tell us what your experience is. Show us through your logbook and through your paper what you've learned and your skills. So I'm going to stop there. We got about 15 minutes for questions.
Yeah, so many. Wow. Yeah, let's start with Val.
I have a question. In those two certification levels, do you think of those as a progression of one to the other, or a sort of a terminal either one?
No, they're kind of meant to be a progression. That's how I progressed. So I started. I got certified in the before times, the old system, which was rolled into level 2, and then after leaving here and some more experience, went up to level 1, and that's certainly what we're hoping for. But it doesn't. That's not a requirement. If you become a certified hydrographer, you become a level 2 and you want to stay there, fair. You want to skip level 2 altogether and go straight for level 1, also fair. You see it happen both ways.
So my follow-up question is, it strikes me that level 1 or the master level is it's kind of a mid-career kind of thing to have gained enough experience to be in that, and that's probably not where most of our students are. Certainly documenting what you've done as you come out of here, but you're certainly not mid-career when you come out of here typically.
Right.
And what are maybe you had it and I missed it, but what do the requirements look like for the lower level? What things do people need to do to attain that if they wanted to achieve that before they?
Yeah, so that's the one where so certified master is looking at S5A, the certified hydrographer, so that level 2 is looking at S5B from an education standpoint. So
they meet that, but what about the experience bit?
The experience is similar. Here, I'll flip back. No, you're good. These are the details that we want to get out on the street. And so depending on how you achieved those S5B education, checkoffs, right? If you went and got a Cat A or a Cat B, if you have a Cat A, it's 24 months Cat B is 36. And if you didn't do a Cat A or Cat B program and you're achieving those requirements through some other avenue, then it's 60 months of experience. And regardless of that case, 24 months of that should be in the field and 24 months in technical charge. And those can lay on top of each other, right? All of your 24 months in the field, you might also be 24 months in technical charge. It might, they might only partially, be used for both, but yeah. Okay, did I answer that?
But so theoretically, you could leave here and in 2 years be applying for level 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Boy, as long as you were working for.
Yeah,
Or levels.
and you were responsible technical charge. Is
Yeah.
that, you're not the lackey, but
That's
you're
what-
leading the
yep.
program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so that could be aggressive to do it in 2 years, but it's possible. Yeah,
More realistically, 2 to 4 years.
sure, yeah.
So do you, when you look at the technical charge, would you consider that differently? Someone applying for level 2 and level 1, is there a difference in technical charge? Because the level 2 talks about more complex surveys. Is there an assessment of the complexity of what the person is in charge of?
It's certainly looked at, but from the manual, the same definition of in technical charge is used. And sort of the exam, that extra chunk of questions for the level 1 will tease a little bit of that out as well.
The exam is where you pull that out.
Yeah, that's certainly part of it. But the board is going to look at that, right? If somebody, somebody from is applying for a level 1 and maybe they've only done one type of survey in one area, that might get heavier scrutiny than somebody's done a broader, scope. I don't know. I'm a little bit newer to the board than Bree is, so maybe Bree, do you have any specific examples or?
I will say that every application is a snowflake, and we spend a lot of time discussing this exact thing. And I think there was some idea that over time we would converge on, sort of standardized notions. I don't think we're not there yet.
Would it be fair to say that for Cat 1 or for level 1, you'd expect them to have some experience in various different forms of survey, like side scan and multi-beam and maybe single beam and side scan or something, and rather than just one type?
Yes, but it's very challenging because there's some people that only do LiDAR. Like I think the most challenging thing has been multi-beam and LiDAR, or, and people sort of being pigeonholed one way or the other. And then also not a lot of people have side scan experience anymore. And that theoretically everyone should. So there's some wiggle in there, I guess.
160 questions is an awful lot.
Yeah.
Do you
I was tired
have
of
a
those.
little bit of an idea of how that exam actually works?
I can only tell you how mine went. And so I went to, I actually took mine at the NSPS headquarters, and I went in there. They gave me an office, set a desk in front of me. I was able to, again, bring all of those printed documents with me. They quickly leaf through them just to make sure I wasn't like hiding a tablet in one or something. And then, they just put a 3-hour timer and you go. It's multiple choice. You've got scratch paper and a calculator to go through to do some of the mathematical things. And I found some of the questions, you'll go through and it'll be a breeze just from either experience or studying. And then I kind of went back through and went through some of those manuals. I'll talk a little bit about how I studied. So rather than trying to memorize, that's a lot of paperwork that I listed there, right? Manuals, and they're super dry. So I sort of skimmed through all of these various manuals, and I put like Post-its next to clauses or pages that I thought might be important. Looking at standards, compliance standards for surveys, like, how many pings per node do we need for NOAA versus Army Corps or whatever. And so I marked those things. Or if there was an equation like, here's how we're going to calculate various things, swath width and whatnot, that was in there. And I just put a Post-it so that when I got stuck, because again, it's a lot of questions, you get fried pretty quick. You can find those things. So that's how I would recommend to study. Some folks I know have gone through and actually memorized a lot of things. But that's certainly not the expectation. Yeah, does that help?
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, come back to you.
Okay, you pointed out the benefits of the certification, and with any certification, there's benefits to it, clearly, for standards and all of that. But there's also then, that implies responsibility.
Sure.
For certain things. And in your benefits, you mentioned a sense of accountability.
Sure.
And I'm just curious, I don't think, I really want to ask, has it ever been a case where someone, because they had certification, they got into a problem legally with, I don't know, a boat hitting a bridge or something, and the chart wasn't accurate? Or has there been those cases where there is the benefit that the certification said, well, look, they followed practical standards or the standards that we set, and therefore, they're not liable, or the alternative?
I don't know of any off the top of my head. I'm looking at Bree if she's heard of any specific examples. But you can see, I mean, sort of beyond that, there's certainly that, right? That sort of like legal court type thing. I was also, when thinking about this, right, the responsibility of, you also need to maintain your training and you need to teach others and all of that. So it's responsibility of certainly of your work and making sure it's done correctly and meeting standards and so on. But it's also like responsibility to the industry and so on. But yeah, I'm not, as far as the ramifications of meeting or not meeting standards, I'm not sure of any specific examples of that going forward against anyone.
Like on the NOAA side, right, you can give lots of examples of, charting things.
Oh, sure, yes, but as far as like
surveys for specific standards.
Sure, but as far as like
how
not
you
affecting a person.
And the training program and the level of education and the people conducting the work and.
Sure.
So there've been lots of court cases that investigate that whole side of things.
Yeah.
Anytime there's a maritime accident, that's going to get investigated.
And that was kind of more what I thought.
I would wager every accident that causes major damage or costs a lot or endangers lives.
Yeah.
Goes down that road. I mean,
Sure. I guess my response is I just don't know how that's affected specifically a certified hydrographer right now. But absolutely, she's 100% right with court cases and whatnot with charting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
You mentioned the manuals a couple of times. I presume these are Navy manuals, training manuals.
So the NOAA standards, the hydrographic standards, the Army Corps standards. I got to figure out what slide I had that on. So I'll pull it up.
So they're not training manuals?
No, although if you have a manual or a book from your training, that would probably be allowed. But these are, so HSSD, that's NOAA standards. IHO S44, that's international standards. Army Corps or US ACE EM 1110, that's Army Corps standards. And then, I took in some textbooks that I had, and there's NOAA. There's a really good NOAA resource on tides that I brought in. It's I would call it more of a educational manual that I brought in as well, and I found another more of an educational manual about I think it was from the Army Corps about photogrammetry, so things like that. But certainly, if you went to a training and they had a manual and you thought that was,
I was thinking like the Army training manuals were terrific.
Sure.
And whether there was a counter to that in the Navy, like for tides and waterfalls, for example.
Yeah, maybe there are, and certainly you can bring in whatever you think is going to help you the most, as far as those sort of official manuals, training, standards and otherwise. A lot of the, there's a good amount of the test that's talking specifically about standards. That's why I list the standard documents here, because there's a good amount of those there. And then this, like I said, there was that NOAA tide manual that really helps with that tides and water level section for sure. Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay, so
The field experience, when does that start? Are you able to accrue it while you're undertaking your education, or does it start once you finish?
Yeah, so that's one of the things the board's been wrestling with a little bit recently, right? Is exactly that. When does it start? So we're looking at your experience after your education. Now, that might change depending on how the affiliate, it might change how the affiliate program is if we get that off the ground. But certainly for these ones, most often we're looking at that experience post-education. Now, if you're somebody that has a pretty broad career, then got some education and so on, that's going to be looked at differently. But the experience gained while in school is going to be looked at more as educational versus field experience, if that makes sense.
Do you have like an idea of the success rate on the exam?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Like the success rate of the exam, like how much people pass?
I don't have that. The statistics on how many people pass versus.
So there's like 3 people who take, right? Right, that have actually had to take a test, right?
The level 1 test you're talking
Yeah, the number of
Yeah.
people who've taken a test under this new schema is very small. So
Yeah.
I can't give you a percentage because there's law large numbers. It's just not enough.
The test doesn't change that much.
No, and so it's a test bank, and they're randomly selected, based on category. We are always seeking donations of test materials. So, like, if you have test questions that you would like to donate to the test pool as a hydrographer, because here we are at the apex of education, right? So if you have test questions that you would like to be included in here, we would love them and welcome them. So I'm going to put it. But I don't. The 160 is new in the 3 hour.
Yeah.
No one's failed yet. Yeah.
The level 2, what we call level 2 now is still pretty similar to what was CH of the past, right? That exam is still pretty similar, and there's quite a few level 2 hydrographers. I forget the number, but if you go on the website, there's quite a few. So there's plenty of people that have passed that exam. The level 1 exam is especially the part that's really new, and there's only 5 or 6 of us, I think, right now. But again, it's really new. So
Patrick, is there opportunity for retaking the exam if it goes horribly wrong? You wouldn't have to go and start all over again. You just retake the exam piece.
No, you can retake the exam. Yeah, absolutely. Set it up for another time.
Did you retake by section, or do you have to take the whole exam?
That's a good question too. I don't think we've run into that.
Look, I think they make you take the whole one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That's a good point.
But the point was, you wouldn't have to restart the entire application from.
Correct. Yeah, no.
Whoever thing to do.
Yeah.
So is there specific test centers? Do you have to travel or?
I had to travel to NSPS to do it. Because it's proctored, right? But I think, and that's
Used
another.
to give them at the hydrographic conference.
Correct. Yeah. So that is one place that is pretty commonly done is at the conferences. I would say that's probably where a solid portion of them have been done.
Board members can also administer them, and they're distributed around the country. So we try to work with you if you're in Alaska and one of our board members is surveying Alaska. We try to minimize that as best we can.
Yeah, so there could be some travel involved, or one of us happens to come to you. And then again, if we get enough applications, I'm sure that they would be entertained to do it at the conferences again. that's how, I don't know if it's been done that way recently, but that's certainly how it was done. You know,
What's the
not too long
makeup
ago.
of the board, Patrick?
So you have, it's 6 of us right now, 6 or 7 of us.
10.
Is it really? Okay.
And then
I always forget. So there's a good number of contractors, people that contract with NOAA or Army Corps and otherwise. There's some folks from academia. There's myself from NOAA, Breeze former NOAA, also on the board. So it's a pretty wide representation of kind of the industry. There.
Do you think they'd accept teaching your course for educational credit as opposed to? I've never taken a relevant course, but I thought of it.
Interesting. I don't know. We haven't run into that, have we?
Same thing goes for other practice experience. My practical experience last thing is all teaching.
Yeah. Yeah, I think certainly the board would have to deliberate on that for sure.
But this is why we would like to pursue some sort of like executive level,
Yeah.
you know, similar to the other countries, because we would like to see senior folks like you, well, you know, having a name and a title, but also taking responsibility for mentoring and bringing people through the actual 1 and 2 program, the level 1 and level 2.
Yeah, so if you go and look at the handful of countries, schemas that have that next level, that executive level, that's, yeah. We are talking about that potentially for the future.
Otherwise, it gets totally ignored because none of the people that make decisions or control money or, you know, make policy pay attention.
Right.
Yeah, Alex.
How long is the certification valid for before you need to renew?
2 years. So every 2 years, you have to turn in your professional development hours, and you can earn those through attending conferences, attending training, practicing hydrography, believe it or not. We want you to continue to do that. Being a part of various professional societies and active in those societies. That's sort of like 2 categories there. Teaching, so passing on your own experience in education, that's part of it as well. And so you collect all of that information. So again, the paperwork, the hard part, collect, you know, letters of thank you for doing a training or certifications, certificates or whatever from trainings that you go to, or transcripts if you take a course at a school, PDH hours that are given at conferences or something like that. You know, keep that all cataloged, and then you'll get an email. I just recently got mine that was like, hey, you're due. And then you fill out a quick form and turn that in. And then that goes to NSPS, and the board will does spot checks on those.
You don't need to retake the test.
No.
What's the goal for PDH hours?
30
for 2
Yep.
years?
2 years. And so it's not necessarily hour for hour either. There's you go into the manual, or you print out the form, the PDH form. It tells you some things are worth 5, for instance, and so on.
Equivalent, 30 equivalent hours.
Sure. Yep. Exactly.
I realize this is all new, so you probably don't know the answer to this, but I was thinking about the hydrographic specs up there and how there's US specific things that people need to know. And that made me wonder about how well accepted between those different certification bodies people's certifications are likely to be. For example, if someone was out, obtain that certification through the European method, to what extent do you think that would be accepted and welcomed in the hydrographic community in the United States and sort of reciprocally?
Yeah, I do know reciprocity was talked about right when I joined the board, and I honestly don't remember a whole part of the conversation. Again, maybe Bree knows more about that. But I think it's key that they're all kind of based on the same thing. Yeah, the tests have, you know, the US one has US things and the Canadian one has Canadian things, but the vast majority of what we're looking at is essentially the same, and that's because of that IBSC, you know, kind of oversight. And so I know that I've gone to places where I've met Canadian hydrographers, and I say I'm certified hydrographer, and they know what that means. So there's certainly at least that. But as far as statutory reciprocity, I don't know if Bree can speak to that.
So that's an interesting question, Val, because there's on the commercial side, like the procurer can say, I will take any of these, or I will only take these from North America, Canada and the US. So we've seen it on that side where they've specified it that way. But then on the board side, on the schemas side, whether we would, establish formal agreements and say if you're, certified by THSOA, you could practice in Canada, or that would meet the. So no resolution yet, but those two kind of parallel conversations, or well, there's the business side, which is you're the customer, you decide, but then there's the back and forth as well on the society side.
Is there any more regulation than just the procurement side? Is there something that says I can't practice as a hydrographer in the US without a?
No, that's the registered licensure piece, but.
Yeah, so certain states could say, right, because that's where it's licensure is state by state. So there are states that could say, you can't practice hydrography in the state. But there's not currently something like that at the national level.
There at least was a push for the hydrographic world to get its act together so that the states didn't say that. Because if you had to get qualified in all the coastal states, that'd be a nightmare.
Yeah, there's been various levels of push, and I don't know where it's at currently. Not anything I've personally worked on, but at least at present it's state by state. But
let's make this the last one.
Yeah, right. So I know you're saying this new system is relatively new, and it seems like there's a lot of obviously there's a lot of questions being asked by people that know a lot about hydrography. So I'm wondering, because it sounds like it wasn't that different from the one before it either. So how long has that been in place, and so how long has this been the kind of thing that's been expected?
Yeah, so certification through THSOA has been around for a while.
Oh, really?
Aligning it with IBSC and the specific education requirements, and then the sort of break off level 1 or the addition of the level 1, that's the part that's new. And so making sure that it meets international standards and becomes at the same sort of operational level as the other 3, and again that level 1, that's the new part.
Okay.
And the level 1 is especially where there's not as much experience by both people trying to achieve it and the board trying to administer it. Like I said, there's only been 5 or so of the level 1s to attempt so far.
Yeah, with that, let's thank Patrick once again.